Get your filthy hands off my son right now. Robert Whitman's voice echoed through the mansion like thunder, causing the soft classical music playing in the background to stop abruptly. Keisha Washington, 32, froze in the middle of the living room, still delicately holding the small hands of Tyler, the 8-year-old autistic boy who had finally started smiling after months of total isolation. The 45-year-old millionaire stood at the entrance to the room, his $3,000 suit impeccable, but his face contorted with a rage Keisha had never seen before. Beside him, 3 guests from Manhattan high society watched the scene with expressions of shock and disapproval, as if they had caught a crime in progress. "How dare you touch my son without permission?" Robert advanced toward Keisha, who instinctively placed herself between him and Tyler. The boy, frightened by the shouting, began to rock back and forth, a sign of stress that Keisha recognized perfectly after 2 years of caring for him. "Mr. Whitman, Tyler was having a meltdown and the music calmed him down," Keisha explained calmly, even though she felt the blood boiling in her veins. "He asked to dance and I just—" "You just completely forgot his place in this house," Robert interrupted her cruelly. "You are the cook, not the nanny, not the therapist, and certainly not someone qualified to touch his son." One of the guests, a blonde woman wearing expensive jewelry, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Robert, you need to be more careful about who you hire. These people sometimes feel too comfortable in our homes." Keisha felt the humiliation burn her skin like acid, but she maintained her composure with a dignity that further irritated Robert. For 2 years, she had been much more than just a cook in that mansion. With a degree in nutrition from Columbia University and an expertise in child development, she had disguised herself as a domestic worker for reasons no one there could imagine. "Tyler, come here now," Robert ordered curtly. The boy looked between his father and Keisha, his large eyes filled with confusion and fear. For the first time in months, Tyler had genuinely connected with someone, had danced, had laughed. And now it was all being destroyed by an attack of prejudice disguised as paternal protection. "Keisha is leaving," Robert announced coldly to Tyler. "You will no longer play with her. I will find a nanny who is better suited to his needs." The words hit Keisha like bullets, but it was Tyler's reaction that hurt her the most. The boy began to cry silently, the kind of crying that she had learned to recognize as deep despair. Tyler would not only lose Keisha, he would lose the only person in the house who truly understood him. "Gather your things and leave immediately," Robert said, taking out his wallet and throwing a few $100 bills on the floor. "There's her severance pay." Keisha looked at the money scattered across the Italian marble and then at Robert. In that moment, something changed in his eyes. The careful submission that she had maintained for 2 years disappeared completely, replaced by a cold determination that made Robert instinctively take a step back. "Very well, Mr. Whitman," she said, her voice calm but laden with a dark promise. "I'll get my things." As she climbed the stairs to the maid's room where she kept her belongings, Keisha smiled for the first time since she had entered that house. Robert Whitman had no idea who he was really firing. He didn't know that she had spent 2 years methodically documenting every financial crime, every tax evasion scheme, every bribe she had witnessed in that mansion. And most importantly, he didn't know that the folder hidden under her mattress contained enough evidence to destroy not only her reputation, but her entire fortune built on corruption and lies. If you're wondering how a simple cook managed to obtain such devastating information about a millionaire, subscribe to the channel because this story of revenge is just beginning, and what Keisha did in the next 48 hours would forever change the lives of everyone involved. 20 minutes later, Keisha was in the kitchen collecting her professional chef's knives, while Robert celebrated with his guests in the living room. Cruel laughter echoed through the mansion like nails on a chalkboard, each comment more venomous than the last. "Did you see how she reacted when I put her in her place?" Robert boasted, pouring $500 a bottle Scotch whiskey. "These people need to know who's boss. I give them a decent job, and they think they can mingle with us." Margaret Thornfield, wife of a senator, laughed as she adjusted her pearl necklace. "Good thing you acted quickly, Robert. Imagine if someone had filmed that scene. A black cook dancing with his disabled son? The tabloid press would love to twist that." Keisha paused when she heard these words, his fists clenching involuntarily. For 2 years, she had swallowed comments like these, each one piling up like fuel for a fire she kept carefully under control. But Robert had no idea who he was messing with. What neither of them knew was that Keisha Washington was no ordinary cook. The daughter of a renowned Detroit neurosurgeon and a civil rights attorney, She had graduated magna cum laude from Columbia University before earning a master's degree in child development from Harvard University. Her disguise as a domestic worker served a very specific purpose. 2 years earlier, Tyler had been a patient of Dr. James Washington, Keisha's father, for a consultation about possible surgical interventions for his neurological conditions. During the consultation, Dr. Washington discovered irregularities in Tyler's medical records that suggested deliberate medical negligence on the part of the staff Robert had hired. When Dr. Washington attempted to report his findings, Robert used her influence to discredit the doctor, threatening her license and destroying her reputation. Dr. Washington died of a heart attack 3 months later, stressed by the smear campaign that he had orchestrated against her. Keisha had infiltrated the Whitman household not for money, but for revenge. And for 2 years, she methodically documented every crime she witnessed. Robert laundered money through fake foundations, bribed health inspectors to approve his unsafe restaurants, and evaded millions in taxes through sophisticated schemes. Even more devastating, Keisha discovered that Robert had defrauded life insurance companies by faking disabilities for Tyler that didn't exist, illegally collecting government benefits while flaunting his wealth. Every suspicious phone conversation had been recorded using devices Keisha had strategically planted around the house. In the kitchen, she opened his hidden laptop and sent an encrypted message to Dr. Michelle Torres, a federal prosecutor specializing in financial crimes and a former college classmate. Package ready for delivery. Operation Manhattan initiated. Robert continued his celebration in the living room, completely unaware that his guests were also being recorded as they admitted to participating in corrupt schemes. Margaret Thornfield had just confessed how she used charitable foundations to launder money for her senator husband. Tyler is better off without that woman, Robert declared too loudly, clearly affected by alcohol. Children like he needs firm boundaries, not excessive affection from maids who don't know his place. Keisha went upstairs one last time to say goodbye to Tyler. The boy was in his room, rocking in the corner, silent tears streaming down his face. When he saw Keisha, her eyes lit up with desperate hope. "Are you coming back?" Tyler asked in his soft, hesitant voice. It was one of the few times he had formed a complete sentence since Keisha had met him. "Not in the way you imagine," Keisha replied, kneeling beside his side. "But I promise you that things will change very soon. And when they do, you'll have people around him who really care about him." Tyler hugged her tightly, as if he knew he was saying goodbye to more than just a cook. He was saying goodbye to the only person in the house who had treated him like a human being. Walking down the stairs for the last time, Keisha paused at the door to the living room where Robert continued to humiliate her memory to entertain his guests. "Problem solved," he declared. "I'll never have to worry about unsuitable people influencing my son again." Keisha smiled coldly. Robert Whitman was about to discover that he had made the biggest mistake of his corrupt life. What he didn't know was that firing Keisha wasn't the end of his problems. It was just the beginning of an operation of justice that she had meticulously planned since the day she set foot in that mansion. As she walked toward the exit, Keisha activated the last recording device she had hidden in the main hall. In 48 hours, Robert would discover that underestimating a black woman with a Harvard degree wasn't just racism, it was terminal stupidity. 48 hours after being fired, Keisha was sitting in the modest apartment she shared with her sister in Brooklyn, meticulously organizing 2 years of evidence against Robert Whitman. Photographs of fraudulent financial documents, audio recordings of involuntary confessions, intercepted emails revealing bribes to politicians, all catalogued with the precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment since her first day on the job. "Are you sure about this, Keisha?" Dr. Michelle Torres, federal prosecutor, examined the documents scattered across the dining room table. "This is enough to take down not just Robert, but half of Manhattan's elite. We're talking about tax evasion in the tens of millions, disability benefits fraud, money laundering through fake foundations." Keisha smiled coldly. "Michelle, my father didn't die of a heart attack. He was systematically murdered by the smear campaign Robert orchestrated when Dad discovered that Tyler was being unnecessarily medicated to simulate more severe disabilities, just so Robert could receive government benefits." Michelle stopped flipping through the documents and looked directly at her friend. Dr. James Washington was his father? The neurosurgeon who was discredited by the media 2 years ago. "My father discovered that Robert was drugging Tyler with medications that intensified his autistic symptoms," Keisha continued, her voice controlled but heavy with pain. "When Dad tried to report this to the medical board, Robert used her network of contacts to destroy his reputation. She planted false evidence of medical misconduct, bribed patients to give false testimony, and orchestrated a media campaign. The revelation was devastating. Dr. James Washington had been one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country before his career was destroyed by accusations that were never proven but ruined his professional and personal life. Dad died believing he had lost everything because of a medical error he never made, Keisha whispered, holding a photograph of her father in his white coat. He never knew he had been the victim of a calculated conspiracy to silence him. Michelle was silent, processing the enormity of the situation. Keisha, this isn't just about financial justice. It's about posthumously clearing his name. It's about much more than that, Keisha corrected, standing up and walking to the window overlooking the city. It's about Tyler. That boy is being poisoned daily by unnecessary medications that are hindering his real development. Robert profits from his own son's suffering. Meanwhile, at the Manhattan mansion, Robert Whitman celebrated what he considered a complete victory. He had gotten rid of the problematic maid, and hired a new German cook, blonde and quiet, who knew his place and never questioned orders. Problem solved, he commented on the phone to Margaret Thornfield. Some people need to learn boundaries the hard way. Now Tyler can be treated properly, without unnecessary emotional interference. What Robert didn't know was that at that very moment, federal agents were obtaining search and seizure warrants based on the evidence Keisha had provided. Dr. Torres had worked for 2 days straight, building a case that would turn the investigation into one of the largest financial fraud operations of the decade. The operation will take place on Monday, Michelle informed Keisha during an encrypted call. We're going in simultaneously, search and seizure at the mansion, freezing of all bank accounts, opening of a congressional investigation into the politicians who took bribes, and immediate cancellation of fraudulent benefits. Keisha felt a cold satisfaction. What about Tyler? He will be temporarily removed from custody and undergo an independent medical evaluation. If we confirm that his unnecessary medication is causing permanent custody loss, Robert will lose custody permanently. Tyler was locked in his room, sedated with drugs that suppressed not only his unwanted autistic behaviors, but also her natural personality and ability to develop. The boy who had danced and smiled with Keisha now spent his days in a vegetative state, generating $4,000 a month in government benefits for Robert. Sunday will be a special day, Robert announced to the guests, raising her crystal glass. I will close the biggest deal of his career. An international partnership that will triple his investments. What he didn't know was that Sunday would indeed be special, but not for the reasons he imagined. At 6 o'clock on Sunday morning, while Robert slept peacefully in his master suite, Keisha was finalizing the last details of an operation she had planned with the precision of brain surgery. She had discovered something that would make her revenge even more devastating. Robert was not only a fraudster, he was also a murderer. The evidence proved that he had deliberately sabotaged the medical treatment of 3 previous autistic children to maximize the benefits he received, resulting in the death of 2 of her. Michelle, Keisha called one last time before the operation. I found something else. Robert isn't just a con artist. He's a man who kills children for money. The revelation was so shocking that Michelle was silent for several seconds. Keisha, that changes everything. We're no longer talking about tax fraud. We're talking about multiple homicide. On Sunday morning, when Robert woke up and went downstairs to eat his $300 breakfast prepared by the new German cook, he had no idea that her life of privilege was about to end so brutally that it would make her previous humiliation seem like child's play. Because Keisha Washington wasn't just an educated black woman seeking justice, she was a force of nature disguised as a maid, and Robert was about to discover that underestimating someone with that level of intelligence and determination wasn't just stupid, it was social and financial suicide. Monday, 6:15 a.m. Robert Whitman woke up to the sound of sirens and violent banging on the front door of her mansion. Still in her silk pajamas, he went downstairs irritated, figuring that some neighbor had had trouble with alarms going off. FBI. Open the door immediately. The authoritative voice pierced the marble and bulletproof glass like a dagger. Robert felt the blood freeze in his veins. Through the security camera, he saw at least 15 federal agents in bulletproof vests, some carrying seizure equipment. There must be some mistake, he muttered to himself, but his hands trembled as he unlocked the door. Dr. Michelle Torres showed her badge and the search and seizure warrant before Robert could even utter a word. Robert Whitman, his investigation is ongoing for federal benefits fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, bribery of public officials, and criminal negligence resulting in death. The list of charges continued for another 30 seconds, each crime read with surgical precision as agents spread out through the mansion. "This is ridiculous." Robert exploded, his face red with indignation. "I'm going to sue you all for trespassing. My lawyers will." "His lawyers have already been notified," Michelle interrupted coldly. "And his bank accounts were frozen at 5 o'clock this morning, including the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands that you thought no one knew about." It was at that moment that Robert saw Keisha calmly walk through the front door, no longer wearing a cook's uniform, but a professional suit that revealed exactly who she had always been. Behind her, Tyler walked hand in hand with a girl of about 12 whom Robert had never seen before. "You," Robert whispered, his voice thick with disbelief and growing horror. "Dr. Keisha Washington," she introduced herself formally for the first time. "Daughter of Dr. James Washington, the neurosurgeon you systematically murdered 2 years ago. And this is my niece Destiny, a child behavioral therapy specialist." Robert felt the ground collapse beneath his feet. "Impossible. You're a cook. We checked her references." Keisha smiled with a coldness that made Robert instinctively recoil. "You checked his references of Keisha Williams, an identity he built specifically to infiltrate your home. Dr. Keisha Washington never needed references to work as a cook because she was never a cook." Michelle approached carrying a box of evidence. "Mr. Whitman, we have here 2,000 hours of audio recordings, 300 photographs of fraudulent financial documents, intercepted emails proving bribery of 12 public officials, and falsified medical records proving that you deliberately medicated Tyler with unnecessary substances to intensify her autistic condition. Furthermore," Michelle continued, her voice taking on an even more serious tone, "we have evidence that you applied the same fraudulent scheme to 3 previous children, resulting in the deaths of 2 of them from intentional drug overdose." Robert staggered, leaning against the wall. "You can't prove any of this." Keisha took a tablet out of her pocket and showed Robert the screen. It was a video recording of his, 3 months earlier, explaining in detail to Margaret Thornfield how to maximize government benefits by over-medicating autistic children. "Surprise," Keisha said calmly. "Every conversation you've had in the last 2 years has been recorded. Every suspicious phone call, every drunken confession, every moment you revealed her true monstrous nature." "Yes, dear," Keisha knelt beside the boy. "And this time, no one will separate us." Robert watched the interaction between Keisha and Tyler, finally understanding that he had lost much more than money and freedom. He had lost the only person who genuinely cared about his son. "For 2 years, Keisha stood up and faced Robert, "I watched you poison an innocent child out of greed. I documented every unnecessary dose of medication you forced Tyler to take. I recorded every conversation where you celebrated the benefits you received from his suffering." Michelle showed a second tablet. "His bank records show that over the past 5 years you have received $240,000 in fraudulent benefits using Tyler as bait. Meanwhile, you denied him real therapies that could have helped his development. And there's more," Keisha continued relentlessly. "Destiny here is a medical student and child development specialist. For the past 3 months, she has been working with Tyler remotely, through video calls I made secretly, to reverse the damage you caused with excessive medication. Destiny has an IQ of 162, Keisha explained. She is also autistic, just like Tyler. But unlike what you did to his son, our family has always treated her autism as a gift, not a source of income." At that moment, Margaret Thornfield was escorted away by the police in handcuffs, shouting about her rights and threatening to sue everyone. 2 other guests from Saturday's dinner were also arrested, her participation in the corrupt schemes already proven through the recordings Keisha had made. "The empire you built on the suffering of innocent children is over," Keisha declared, watching Robert being handcuffed. "But this isn't revenge, Robert. It's justice. Revenge would be letting you live thinking that maybe you would escape the consequences. But what would happen to Tyler and Keisha in the coming weeks would prove that sometimes justice is not just about punishing the guilty, but completely rebuilding the lives he tried to destroy." 6 months later, Keisha Washington walked through the halls of Columbia University as a tenured professor in the Department of Child Development, his immaculate white lab coat contrasting with the radiant smile that had never left her face. Tyler, now on proper medication and free from the drugs Robert had forced on him, ran across campus alongside Destiny, both participating in a revolutionary inclusion program for neurodivergent children. "Dr. Washington," called Dean Dr. Pemberton, approaching with an expression of genuine admiration. The results of the program, his development, is extraordinary. Tyler and the other children have shown progress that our experts thought was impossible. Keisha watched Tyler interact naturally with other children for the first time in his life, his cognitive development flourishing without the chemical restraints his father had imposed. Professor Pemberton, Tyler always had immense potential. He just needed someone to believe in him instead of profiting from his suffering. Robert Whitman, on the other hand, was discovering that the fall of an empire built on crime and prejudice is devastatingly swift. Sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole, he had lost not only his $200 million fortune, but also any shred of social respect he once possessed. "Hey, celebrity," shouted an inmate during shower time at the federal penitentiary. "I hear you like to poison children for money. In here, that has a special name." Robert kept his eyes down, her trembling hands holding a tray of food that cost pennies compared to the $1,000 dinners he used to attend. The irony was perfect. The man who had humiliated people for their skin color and social class was now the most despised in a prison where hierarchy was based on crimes committed. Margaret Thornfield, who had been arrested as an accomplice, lost not only her freedom but also her marriage. His senator husband filed for a public divorce to save his political career, leaving her abandoned in a women's cell where she discovered that privilege does not buy protection or respect. "The adoption process is complete," Dr. Torres informed Keisha during a late afternoon phone call. "Tyler is now officially his son. And Robert's Victim Restitution Fund has already released $2 million to pay for his special education and that of other children who have been harmed." Tyler ran to Keisha when her hung up the phone, his eyes shining with an intelligence that had never been allowed to flourish. "Mommy Keisha," he said clearly, using words Robert had always insisted he would never be able to pronounce. "Can I play piano today?" "Of course, my love," Keisha replied, stroking the hair of the boy who had become much more than a mission of revenge. He had become his son of the heart. "Destiny is waiting to play that new song with you." The modest apartment in Brooklyn had been replaced by a spacious house in Queens, financed not with dirty money like Robert's mansion, but with the decent salary Keisha earned by transforming lives through education. Tyler had his own music studio, where he spent hours creating compositions that revealed an unsuspected artistic genius. "You know what's the most ironic part of this whole story?" Keisha remarked to Michelle during a celebratory dinner. "Robert always said Tyler was a burden, a medical expense with no return. Today Tyler composes music that is being studied in music conservatories as examples of neurodivergent genius." Michelle laughed, raising her wine glass. The genius that Robert tried to suppress with drugs has become living proof that he understood nothing about the real value of people. On the last Sunday in October, Keisha received an unexpected letter in prison. It was from Robert, handwritten in shaky handwriting that betrayed the despair of someone who finally understood the magnitude of her choices. "Dr. Washington," the letter began formally. "I know I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I need you to know that I now understand what I really did. Not just to Tyler, but to all the children I used to make money. I see Tyler on television, playing the piano and smiling, and I realize it could have been like that all along if I hadn't been a monster." Keisha read the entire letter, in which Robert confessed to additional crimes and begged her to continue caring for Tyler with the love he never knew how to give. At the end, a single line summed up 2 years of perfectly executed revenge. "You didn't just save my son. You showed her who he should have been." Tyler, now 9 years old and developing social skills that surprised all the experts, occasionally asked about his biological father. Keisha always responded with age-appropriate honesty. His first father was sick in a way that hurt people. Now he's in a place where he's learning to get better. Keisha and Tyler's story became a case study in universities across the country, proving that neurodivergent children can thrive when they receive unconditional love instead of being treated as a source of profit. Destiny, now 13, had become a national activist for the rights of special children, using her own experience to educate families about acceptance and proper development. 3 years ago, I was just a black woman disguised as a cook in a racist mansion, Keisha reflected during a lecture at Harvard University. Today, I am the mother of an extraordinary child who has taught me that the best revenge is not to destroy our enemies, but to build something so beautiful that his evil becomes irrelevant. Tyler, sitting in the front row of the audience, applauded proudly for the woman who had transformed her medical nightmare into a musical dream come true. At the age of 9, he was already composing symphonies that professionals took decades to master. Robert Whitman tried to destroy a black child and an autistic child out of greed, but ended up creating two transformative forces that changed national legislation on children's rights. The best revenge is not to repay the evil we have suffered, but to achieve greatness that dwarfs those who tried to diminish his greatness. If this story of justice, overcoming adversity, and unconditional love touched his heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes karma needs a little help from courageous people willing to fight for what is right. Share it with those who need to believe that every monster can be defeated and every child deserves to be loved exactly as they are.